Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, I'm Malathi Renati from Takshashila Institution, and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. This is the second and final episode of the topic, The Joy of Play, which is a conversation with the authors of the book Get Kids to Play, Saumil Majmudar and as well as Vijay Krishnamurthy. While Saumil is the co-founder, the CEO and managing director of SportzVillage, Vijay is a sports research scholar and an executive coach. So in the first episode, and I would request our listeners to kind of go through the first episode because we covered a substantial amount of content there. In the first episode, we looked at broadly at space, that is, where do kids play, whether it's indoors, outdoors. How can space be reimagined in a creative way? We also looked at time, that's when can kids play, which is at school, at home, and everything in between. And then we looked at the child. So the child is the sort of the protagonist in many ways. So we started understanding how early is too early and the importance of equilibrium across skills during the formative years. So we'll continue from where we left. So Vijay, during our conversations thus far, right, when we referred to play in its basic form, we were referring to the general free play and unorganized games, right? However, if a kid sort of develops interest and has the skills for organized sport, how do you think as a parent this can be navigated?
Yeah, and so a part of it is in the same thing, that is free play, and if the interest towards. So the way I break it down is one of the ways to look at it is individual sport versus team sport.
Team sport.
Angle, right? And I'm just quoting an example. Of course, this is not directly from the book, but I remember if a parent is sharp and observant, they can do some terrific stuff. For example, Vishwanathan Anand's mother had regularly noticed that this chap is not going downstairs and playing soccer with his friends and all that. And for some reason, he was happy to solve puzzles, even, Scrabble, and he spent more time doing all that, right, indoor. So she used to play recreational chess at YWCA. And when she used to go, you would say, no, I'll come along, but not play still soccer with my friends and all that, right?
Right.
Now, just look at that being an example of just giving a sport like chess as an example here. It's not that hard to spot what's happening. The reverse also. The kid is saying, I want to go to a larger playground, play with my friends and things like that. So one is spotting talent from the family, from beginning at home. To further answer your question of how does it progress further is parent, then the PE teacher in school, which is multi-sport kind of thing. Eventually, it's the sports coach who's for that designated sport, right? And if I wish it was systemic, and I hope one of those things that could happen is if each one is in alignment. If someone's dribbling skills and footwork is better more than hand-eye coordination, with hand-eye coordination, you move into like racket sport or cricket and everything. With dribbling, you can go into running and soccer kind of thing. But if they work hand in hand, each one can forward the talent and the kid can become a beneficiary.
Right.
I don't think we are there at that level where it's happening so seamlessly. But that would be the right way, each one observing and then the system takes over. Once you're in the pool of that, then it takes over.
Right.
So, I mean, this is exactly we do fitness assessment, we do skill assessment, and we build something called a talent quotient. And we have a sports mapping in our report which says if you have better lower body strength and this, therefore you might think about this sport, and that is given to the parents as a guide. Let's say, right, your child seems to be. It doesn't mean that he or she has to do this, but looks like currently the skills and fitness are going towards that, because skill and fitness is one thing, but your aptitude and your interest is another.
Correct.
Those two. To your other point, I think there is this notion of sports type and personality types.
Right.
And kids are changing as they are growing up, as all of us know. All of us changed over time. We may be changing even today, hopefully, for the better. And therefore, there is notion of, let's say, sports that have a invading angle, right? Football, I invade my opponent's territory,
More
score a goal, and come
competitive.
back.
Right.
Now, competitors there and everything, but the sport has an invading angle. I had to go into your territory, score a goal, come back.
Correct.
Badminton, I stay in my territory.
Correct. Got it.
So we just think about that. That brings out a certain personality orientation, right? There are sports that require you to invade an opponent's territory and win. There are sports that require volleyball, badminton.
Where you
They're
stay
as
within
physical,
yours.
as competitive, but they require you to stay in your territory and win, right?
They're interesting.
So that invading, not invading is one notion. Other is contact, non-contact,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? So the Anand example is great. And so there is stuff around mapping of behavior, personalities to the type choice of sports, or reverse, which is based on choice of sport. You get to know about your child better.
Yeah.
Very true.
And adding to that quick one, Malti, here is also when you think of a personal example here, again, gender, boys and girls. I remember my younger one, I mean, because I played a lot of tennis, she got into the tennis thing, but then she found there were too many boys there and less girls. She eventually stayed towards badminton because all her friends and there were more girls playing. I mean, it could be a Saina Sindhu effect or more girls were playing. There were more girls available to play, and that became more fun. Now, that was a moment, as much as I felt bad that she's not following the primary sport, I know better. It was led by her, which led her to play for longer time. Right?
But on actually a similar note, I played badminton at a fairly senior level till my 8th standard. Then I figured out all the girls were watching football, so I went towards football. So it's you might have different reasons for changing sports.
Yeah,
as well.
right. No, but it's interesting that you mentioned this because even in the space chapter, right? The chapter that you all have written on space, right? One interesting data point that I read somewhere else was also the way the public spaces are designed are important because each gender prefers and at each different age groups, mind you. When they're younger, they all might play together because more or less physical strength is sort of similar. But then as they get into puberty and beyond, right, is when they'll start to the larger grounds are taken up by the boys, and the girls might not want to go there because they might get hurt, right? Because when you hit the ball too hard, let's say in a cricket ground. So when they created public spaces which had these smaller areas, right, where the girls could kind of play, games which maybe are not are more kind of aligned to their interests. They found that more children were actually using the space.
Since we're discussing child chapter, this is very important. One, children also play because they want to hang out with their friends.
Right.
Adults and coaches look at the child as a talent engine. The child is a bunch of emotions who wants to be cool with his friends or her friends.
Right.
So the objectives are very different. I want to be with my cool friends so that I can be cool, and my mom wants me to play and pursue a career in tennis.
Right.
Now,
the contradicting. Yeah.
Now, fundamentally, the child is the central actor here. That's one. That friends are a very important part of decision making in your choice of sport, not just skills, fitness, and all
Very
that.
true, especially at
Second
that
is
age.
we also in the research I found out that boys play primarily for the physicality and the competitiveness. Girls play for the social nature and bonding and staying together. So the reason you play are very different.
Very true. Yeah.
So once you know about the reason the child is playing, you can then figure out what to create. For girls, what kind of environment to create. And in the apartment complex that we stay in, we created this thing where we have slots. In the same tennis court, we put nets. So the same tennis court gets divided to 3 play areas. So there's small kids playing in this one play area with nets, another older kids playing in another play area with nets, and the girls are playing. So the different play spaces that you can create out of the same space. Right? If you think modular. And kids are fine playing in that 1/3 of a tennis area space.
Right. No, I think that we need to be creative, and this is where I think again, from the Samaj perspective, right? Be creative, and then the markets will kind of maybe step in to facilitate that, right? But I think these are very good points. Thanks, Saumil and Vijay.
And just on that point on the Samaj piece, I think very often all you need is an enabler. You don't need like if you let's say go and keep a football goalpost in a public ground, chances are kids will come and start playing football.
Right.
Now the goalpost doesn't cost much. Right? And Arun Pai, our friend who's been advocating this for a long time, is just saying that look, you don't just go and set up a goalpost, set up a volleyball, kids will come and play. Doesn't take a whole lot.
It doesn't take a whole lot. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And sports also has such a sort of profound impact, right, on our lives, because
Yeah.
we all have played, right, individual or team sports to some level, and we know how it sort of inculcates those life skills. We spoke about that briefly too, like discipline, resilience, especially when you're in a match and you have to, it's that one goal that makes a difference, and you have just a minute left, right, and then to kind of the punctuality that is developed, the teamwork, the leadership qualities. I mean, all of these are transferable skills across
Yeah.
domains and sectors, professionally and personally, right, at some point. So,
But Malathi, since you're discussing the child, I think the other important piece in the child thing is the aggregation. The problem is not that kids don't want to play. Problem is when I go to play, I need 20 other kids or 10 other kids to show up.
yeah, right, right.
And in today's society, that is the problem. That I'm showing up at a ground, I don't know if 10 other friends will show up or not.
All right.
They're busy with other stuff. So I think Samaj has to solve the aggregation problem. Each child is interested.
And this is
Somebody has to
especially the
say,
case.
all of us show up at 5:30 at this public ground
Right, right.
every Monday, right?
I think in independent, I mean, in RWAs, in the rental kind of apartments, right, complexes, this sort of is easier to solve. But in independent homes, it becomes a challenge, because then to get that aggregation to happen, right, and to coordinate with maybe others in that neighborhood starts becoming a challenge. But then again, I think society or Samaj or that community has to find a solution that's local, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in fact, so the sport also has sort of the power to break social norms, right? It brings equity. It helps empower youth to overcome those social hurdles and challenges. It also kind of encourages girls to express themselves and overcome stereotypes. And we have stats that it's also mentioned in the book that over 90% of women holding C-level positions in corporates have played sports to some level. Right. One fine example is Indra Nooyi, who's the former CEO of PepsiCo. She was a passionate player herself, and it was interesting. I was just reading up about this yesterday, and she was responsible for starting the first women's cricket team in Madras Christian College back in the 70s.
Wow.
And so it helps bring that out in an individual, and it's a leveler in many ways. And as society, I think we should kind of use sport and leverage on it. And the government too has highlighted its importance to the economy in the draft NSP, the National Sports Policy of 2024. It's looking at things like job creation, it's looking at manufacturing and sports tourism, amongst other things. I've actually spoken about this in another earlier podcast. So I wouldn't want to go into the details of this, because this is a topic that many people have spoken about in the past. And I'd like to just move on into the content bit, the what and how of play. So for this, Vijay, I'd just like to ask you, how can we make learning fun, like to think out of the box? I mean, while also ensuring that it's age appropriate, and we also don't want the child losing interest or getting hurt, right? Because if the young kids are playing with older kids, or the equipment is not, age appropriate.
Yeah, I think content is a very critical piece. And two ways to break this. The more structured it is, school and all that, content becomes even more critical. But I'm a big believer that kids can create their own content if there's no structure also, right?
Yes,
Which
yes,
which
absolutely.
we know, and we've all been kids, we know how things work. We can frame our own rules and do it. But content is important as whether it's for safety. And also, when you mention the word equity, I think one of the key things is in schools, for example, why content plays a bigger role. Think of equivalent math or science class. You have a book, you have curriculum, and you know that everybody is on it, and you're tracking their effort, and they're all going through it, right?
Right.
Sport, generally, if you notice, I've been lucky, me or Saumil, I think fortunate that I don't know, maybe it was sport you was being selected or got into those groups. But I know several who never got into those, whether it's being asked to play, invited to do something, or, being part of sports team, things like that. So content plays an important role where everyone has an equal chance in, at whatever levels, without judging at what level, and they can learn at their own pace.
Right.
But you want to them to go through it. So PE teachers, and this is where Saumil's Sports Village also comes in. If you have a particular curriculum in this term and the next term for this particular year for grade 3, grade 4, completing that content and seeing where they're at is a very critical thing. Not more for judging performance, but for participation, and that everyone is participating. Now, that is at a grassroots layer again of content being made for participation. And although I'm just going one step ahead, in chapter 5, when we wrote about facilitator, content is just a static. It is how creatively
It's how it's delivered.
the person who's going to deliver it.
Right.
And Saumil talked about one of those, like, we all have those teachers who, someone taught us science or math in a different way. Like I had one teacher who said, why don't you do your division? If you're watching a cricket game, why don't you tell me the run rate directly of how many balls left? So there you go, right? I mean, you can actually do that. And sport, to me, plenty of creative ways that you can teach it. So how you can leverage the content is there. Of course, you need ways to design the content, and then with that, what you do, both are two equal important parts.
Yeah, and also it's interesting you mentioned that, right? So like how you mentioned math, and so if we can use sport, right, to incorporate fun group activities and make it a more experiential learning across subjects, and for that, of course, we need to have creative ideas for this. So it cannot be like there's always a toolkit there and each teacher follows that. Maybe as a starting point, yes, but for example, teach physics with the trajectory of the ball being kicked into towards the goal, right? What is the trajectory? What's the angle? Maths, again, like you mentioned, you could take the average or the probability of a ball hitting a target in n number of tries. They have the child try to hit the target and see how many. So I think these sort of things, if the teachers or the facilitators, rather even parents, can think of creative ways to do so, and it then becomes a fun activity, right? We're not forcing that on the child, but rather they're enjoying while they learn across subjects. Right? And I think WHO also advises that children have 60 minutes of some physical activity, not necessarily sport as such, organized sport, but some physical activity. And I think that's important also for our listeners to know, right? Because that's something that's inculcated from childhood onwards. So, Saumil, in the National Education Policy, right, the 2021, it has guidelines for sports and extracurricular activities. Could you suggest what steps, let's say, if I'm the principal of a school, what steps could be taken to ensure the school sort of transitions into a more holistic education setup? Because this is a gradual process. It cannot just happen overnight. So maybe with your experience with SportzVillage, if you have any suggestions on that?
Sure. I mean, so let's pick up on the word you used in the just a minute ago called fun, right? And it's a very important word. I think that's a central word in this entire kids play experience piece. And fun doesn't have to mean that kids are partying. We're all, fun doesn't,
Right.
You could be doing the podcast, not laughing, but having fun because engaging, right? So fun, the three elements, the way we define fun. One, you're fully involved in it. Two, you're deeply connected to the people you're doing it with. You're not being left out. You're kind of part of a group. And three, you're being pushed slightly beyond the limits. Too much is anxiety creation. Too little is boring.
That would differ from child to child as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And therefore, when you have these three things, fully involved, deeply connected to people doing it with, and stressed slightly beyond the limits, you're having fun. It could be running a marathon. It could be writing a book. It could be cooking a meal. Doesn't matter. It just, that's fun. It doesn't mean that you're laughing and partying. That's important. Therefore, how do you scale fun? How do you enable fun at scale, right? And that's where we learned that a combination of structure and unstructure is required. Structure lets you teach at scale. All of us learn the same math. All of us learn the same English broadly, right? And then some of us read more outside school, did more out in one area versus another, and we all chose our paths. But the core was the same. That's how you scale. Otherwise, it's just you just can't scale. So one is the structure, curriculum, lesson plan. So copying education is a good example. That's what we did as Ready Sports. We just copied what the academics is doing. Like in maths, you have a syllabus, you have national standards. Then you have a syllabus, you have daily curriculum, you have daily lesson plans, props to teach a lesson plan, teacher to teach the lesson plan properly, assessment after X sessions to say, hey, did you learn or not? If you didn't learn, what do I do now? If you learned very well, what do I do with you? Normal curve, how do I move kids from left to right? Parents being told, hey, your kid is a genius, your kid needs to do some work. That happens in academics. The same thing essentially has to happen in sports. If you teach sports and play as the way a school leader handles the structure, the assessments, the parent-teacher involvement, the teacher training for academics, copy into sports. On the content side, the content and facilitator are very closely connected. We learned it the hard way. When we started Edisport in 2009, Malti, I thought we'll be a cool content and technology company.
Hmm.
That we'll go and train PE teachers, and we'll come back and look at data, and there'll be 5 of us sitting in a room and millions of kids will be playing, and we look at data and go and tell, hey, now you do this, now you do that, right?
Right.
I still remember in a hot afternoon, after many months of trying, I got a meeting with the school principal, 3,000 kids school. Finally, she said, okay, Mr. Saumil, we want to go ahead with the program. I said, fantastic. And then she looked me in the eye and said, so who are you going to send? And I said, look, you already have like 10 PE teachers,
Right.
right? I'll train them.
Hmm.
I still remember she looked me in the eye and said, Mr. Saumil, I like what you're doing. I hope you succeed. But if you don't send your own staff to conduct this program on the ground, I guarantee you that your curriculum will gather dust in the library.
Hmm.
And next year, when the management asks me, should I renew? I'll say no. Choice is yours. And in that instant, I moved from a technology consulting data company to a what you would call a full service company, because I realized that she was essentially telling me as a well-wisher that you can make all the brochures you want, but if you want real stuff on the ground, you have to embrace this entire pain and fun of having a team of people
Hmm.
who are actually delivering on the ground on a daily basis. As we speak today, 1,000 of our team members have gone to schools and conducted classes.
And they are having fun while doing so, right? They enjoy that process, not so
Oh
much
yeah,
as
yeah. And in fact, my complaint to them always is that they get so much of positive energy from the kids,
yeah.
and all I get to see is some report cards and some,
Hmm.
and very often only escalations come to us. Right? We don't need to.
Right. Yeah. No, but that's an interesting point you mentioned, because that it also means that recruiting qualified physical education teachers, right, and giving, and it's a chicken and egg problem here, right? So we know that PE teachers are not given the rightful place amongst other teachers in a school. The compensation is poor. Ensuring that they are also part of the decision making. They're part of the parent-teacher meetings that happen, and not just
So let me respond to that. See, when I
right.
started, a lot of PE teachers I used to meet, and very often sometimes they would feel threatened by what we're doing and so on. Some of them were very expansive, and they came and told me, "Sir, आप जो बोल रहे हो, what you're saying, I also tried 10 years ago. And management told me go and get the school team to win medals.
The outcome
So
is
that's
what
what I've
we
been doing. That's what I've been doing.
Right.
Now you've come and you're telling me you're only getting them to win medals, but I did what my boss told me to do." So the problem was that the PE community was not able to present the value of inclusion, all kids, benefits in a way that could convince parents to pay more. It could also be timing. It could also be messenger. It's a combination. But to present the value of a PE program to the stakeholders, whether it is a school leader, principal, or a parent, was one missing link in this whole process, right? And the ability to, the distinction in the sports context, especially, Malti, is important between teaching and coaching.
Right.
Very often in the sports world, we actually use the word coach all the time, which by definition very often implies performance
Right.
or better performance, elite. So
You're
the
looking at a
school team
result.
will get better. Now, if I want to get better, somebody like Vijay is great because he's a coach, executive coach. I want to get better. But somebody who doesn't want to get better, who's like not liking sports, to get me to like sports is a very different person.
Right. To enjoy that process, right? Not so much.
That is a teacher. A teacher's job is to get the disinterested kids to like the subject. A coach's job is to get the elite kids to do better.
Better.
In sports, what's happening is we are bringing coaches inside schools. Whereas what you need is teachers inside schools.
Yeah. And it's a
Even
gradual
the,
process, right?
yeah, even the vocabulary, you say, that, oh, there's a coach. No, he's a
Right.
PE teacher.
Yeah.
He or she is a PE teacher. So this fundamental difference in teaching and coaching is a very important distinction. Inside the school, we need teachers. Outside the school, we need coaches.
Right.
In the sports context.
I think
No, so-
great point, Saumil. I think we definitely don't call someone as a maths coach, right? It's a maths teacher.
Correct.
Right. So just another quick one I want to add, Malti, is also we have to observe what children are watching. If you recall, any of us, three of us now, if you recall childhood, has there been any parent-teacher PTM meeting where a PE teacher sat along who had equal status, and they also said, math and science is okay, but would like he or she to run more, get better, eat healthier? Has anyone even given that as an equal input? I can't even recall. And even now, maybe sparingly, it's happening now. But how often is that, literally we call it a seat at the table, is that PE teacher sitting there at that PTM?
Yeah.
Right? And this is not so. Imagine subconsciously both the parent and the child. So if I'm a child, despite I do anything, I'm the sporty kid, I don't even have a representative of someone who's talking about my work, right? And also as a parent, so why things go more and more towards academics is usually sharpest kid, very good in math, very good in science. Obviously, science and math teacher, and they become class teachers. I'm just giving you the construct in science schools. When have we seen a PE teacher as a class teacher? Never.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So child is also observing. So slowly their conditioning and belief system is, what, math and science, what is my best way? And kids are smarter. What is my best way to gain attention here? I'll do well in this, and this is my teacher, and this will happen. So this discrimination is also something that needs to, I think school management box this falls in. But that's very important for the child well.
Compensation, other things too, right? That actually, is contributing to this, and of course, the quality of the physical education, as in the courses itself, the degrees, the colleges, the kind of quality courses that are out there, right? We know many people who go out of the country to kind of earn the degree, right? So can we? And this is where I think the bazaar should step in, and if there's a demand for it, there will be courses.
People are going outside are going for sports management degrees. People are going outside, not for physical education degrees.
Right. Because also the compensation is poor. That's why
it's a big distinction. There's a very different class of people who are going for physical education. Nobody's going abroad for physical education degrees. They're going for sports management.
Right.
And also for kids, as a rounding point here for kids, if you don't have this regular, even in term 1 to term 2, did I do well in sport or not, is not being told. Now, exaggerate, I have to go win a medal now. It's an extreme thing for the kid.
Right.
Whereas I've not seen, if you do well in a unit test in science, you're being taught good. Nobody said you go win Science Olympiad and come back.
Yeah, that's true.
So imagine what is the effort that now you have to do to get something basic. Which no wonder a lot of them fall through, and they think anyway, this is it.
On this point, one of our attempted intervention is to create more opportunity for kids to compete inside the school. So we do intra-class tournaments, inter-class tournaments within the same school, in the same school premises. So there is this chance to shine, if you will, or at least perform and learn, experience competition. We also do the EPL, Edu Sports Partner League, where very often, sometimes the world's second worst team is playing the world's third worst team, right? But they're both having fun. The kids are fully engaged. The kids are fully committed. So it's important to remember that competition is not just at the elite. Competition can be at all levels.
Yeah, so true, right? And I think, and we've touched upon the facilitator role also in our conversation of the last 5 minutes. But we know that also play is very primal, right? All living beings. So even if you've seen animal babies, right, they learn social and motor skills by playing amongst their peer group. So and it's fun. Just watching them is fun, and so even when we see kids just playing, just being creative, I'm sure how many parents can forget how their baby or toddler would prefer happily playing in the kitchen with the regular utensils, ladles, spoons, versus as opposed to a branded toy that's maybe sitting in the living room, right? So being a primal need for children, and that they can adapt and find ways to play. If left to their own devices, right, is an important thing, and I think that's something we should not bring too much of structure into this. So as facilitators, knowing that when to step in, when to step out. This for either one of you. But now that India is also moving up the economic ladder, right, and there's more disposable income across different socio-economic groups, you see more and more parents are now trying to provide opportunities for their child to pursue their sports as an interest, right? So as a sporting parent, right, what are some of the do's and don'ts that we should spell out? Because I think this is getting we just during our conversation mentioned how competitive parents can also get, right? Wanting to see the results. So some do's and don'ts.
Quick one I'll go is a real experience that I faced, which is a negative example, by the way, is so sometimes parents are buying stuff because they didn't have it when they were kids, not because what the kids require now.
Right.
So it has happened that in a tennis coaching program, a dad who's well-to-do corporate honcho brings special edition autographed racket of Roger Federer, and then hands it down to the kid, and now is hoping that the performance of the kid playing tennis will improve. Now,
Right.
that is so much pressure, and that has, so you don't need to do that. So affordable income, having access, or we have sporting equipment now much more available. We have home delivery and things like that, so that is available. But that fun part, upskilling, going step by step, that still takes time. Just because you have the equipment doesn't mean this is going to happen.
Correct. And the interest too should be aligned, right?
Yeah, and you earn it, you get it, and then you got to gamify that portion. So I think parental angle is very, very critical in this. I could afford it doesn't mean my child needs it right now.
Right.
And it has to be very objective, that if it needs to compete, it has to go through the ladder, and each equipment is useful at that particular point in time. Right. So the big point is, I think just because generationally went from scarcity to abundance, you don't overcompensate, and you may even actually damage the whole thing.
Right. Right.
So let me give you some data points and some anecdote. Right, in the US, 60 to 70% of kids drop out of organized sports every year because of parental pressure and coach pressure. They're dropping out. So they're voting with their feet.
Right.
Just because of parental pressure, coach, they want to play, but the pressure becomes so much. There are now laws being debated. I was invited to this project Play Summit, where the discussion about laws being, US is a very legal society, right? That parents should not be allowed in recreational games. There are parents having fights. It's just crazy. It's just gone to the extreme, right? To your point of equipment, I still remember I used to play badminton, and backhand is always the problem. I remember going to my dad, talking about equipment, saying, I want this wristband. So he said, why do you want a wristband? So I said, my backhand is weak. So he said, Achha, so if you buy a wristband, your backhand will be strong. They were like, yeah, I think so. I didn't get it, but
Yeah.
but to a point, I think kids had to lead, parents had to follow. I think the definition of success is a very important definition. Unfortunately, we are viewing success as sports scholarships. We are viewing success as getting a competitive league position, IPL or anywhere else, right? I think success is your child staying in sport. Success is your child falling in love with play, staying healthy and fit for life, especially with the kind of unfortunate issues that are going on around student well-being, mental health issues, the kind of crazy stuff that's going on. I think the good definition of success is that your child is playing and is healthy and fit for life. Automatically, the child will stay away from a lot of other stuff, drugs and a lot of other stuff. They'll stay away. They stay with good, they have the right discipline. I think it's important to redefine success. Unfortunately, sports glorifies elite success.
Right.
We haven't had enough chances or situations of glorifying people who balance sports and academics. We need to celebrate them. We are not celebrating them enough. Right? We have to celebrate those kids who played, let's say, at a national level, maybe not at international level, and also got 95% in gold medals. Fantastic. Now that's something. Because I always felt that, okay, you played for the country, played whatever, and then you failed in your academics. Big deal, man. In my mind, big deal. Do both. Then I'll respect you. Right? You played for the country and you cracked academics. Now that is something that is worth doing. And people who are doing it, those need to be celebrated. We are only celebrating this and we're saying, of course, academics will drop. No, of course. No. In IIT Bombay, I couldn't get into the team, the 8 better people, and they were better in badminton and better in JE ranks. We had a guy from Mauritius who was in the Olympic team. Right? IIT Madras now has this thing about JE and sports scholarship. So it's possible to balance. I think we are giving our kids in sports a free pass by saying, if you're playing sports, academics will suffer. No. What's happening is the kids are playing sport, then they're partying, then they're hanging out, then they're doing social media, and then academics are suffering. Of course, it'll suffer.
Yeah, it's too much on the plate.
You can't do everything and say, I'll be. Of course, you have to choose. You have to stop some social media, stop some partying. Then you can balance sports and academics. There's enough time. I think adults have to hold kids to a higher standard, kids in sports to a higher standard. I feel we are just letting it go.
And also, adding to this, I'm just harping on my previous point, this disproportionate thing about sport that you have to achieve. If you're doing well in science and math, we have not won a Nobel recently, let's say, but we won an Olympic medal, no? So I'm just thinking, anyone who's studying science or something is not said that, okay, you leave everything and only take science drill and go get the medal for me. I don't think so. And it is not even, and we're talking about kids zone.
Right.
We're talking about K-12 program. Where is this question of disproportionate thing at that age? I can't even imagine. So I think we need to almost say that, have you got B grade in all subjects is like superstar, versus A here and F here, and we need to have that evenness.
Right. No, I think as parents and as facilitators, I think it's important, as you all mentioned, right, with those examples, that we revisit how we are. It's sort of getting internalized also, right, as the years go by. That we're normalizing it, which is actually not good, and we're seeing the data sort of speaks for it.
I've been in forums where like people are like, yeah, of course, if they're playing, then the academics suffer, no? And like, why will it suffer? You're letting it suffer.
Right. We need to pivot and see where we can bring in that balance, right? Yeah. No, this is wonderful. I'll need to conclude now. Unfortunately, we're running out of time as well. But any closing thoughts? Any one suggestion from both of you? Anything that's comes to the top of your mind?
I would say, parents need to start playing, even if they've not played. And at the moment you get going, whatever it is, whether it's cycling and any form of play, you've already stepped into the direction of creating an environment, and kids would follow, and it's going to automatically become a healthy situation.
So true.
I would maybe extend that to say parents need to ask more of the school program. Schools can do a lot more. They have the space, they have the time, they have the budget, they have the resources. We are not demanding enough of the sports program.
Yeah, that will also elevate it, right, to alongside the other academy. No, wonderful. Thank you so much, Saumil and Vijay. It was a lovely conversation and so many important. I just hope that our listeners too have some food for thought and seeing how, as society, we can bring in that change. I'll have to conclude here, but I just want to also remind our listeners that there is a sports course that's going to be hosted on the Open Takshashila platform. So this is called Affecting Change, Transforming Women's Sport in India. It's from the 12th of April to the 26th of April of this year. And early bird there's no early bird deadline as such, but I would encourage you all to kind of participate and be part of that program or spread the word. The link will be shared in the show notes. Thank you once again, Saumil and Vijay. And thank you to all our listeners.
Thank you, Malathi. Enjoyed the conversation.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.